So we've said as we move through the 13th chapter, the last chapter of Ketubot, that the ordering of this chapter is not quite like the rest of the tractate. It's not organized in subject matter order. It's actually organized by two judges, Hanan and Admon, who gave various rulings, which the sages either did or did not accept. And yesterday we looked at the rulings of Hanan, who was actually rejected by the sages. And now we're going to move on to Admon. And Admon actually has 7 sayings. So we'll stay with Admon for a few days. Admon Omer Shiva. Admon says 7. And we'll see, by the way, that sometimes the halacha goes with him and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see how he goes. Mi shemet v'hiniach banim uvanot. Someone who dies and leaves sons and daughters. So here, at least, we are in the subject matter of Ketubot. So maybe here we can see, by the way, why this string of sayings has come into this chapter of the Mishnah. Because we're going to start with Ketubot. Mi shemet v'hiniach banim uvanot. Someone died and they left sons and daughters. Bizman she'anechasim merubin, habanin yorshin ve'habanot yizonu. When the possessions are many, so when the estate is plentiful, the sons inherit and the daughters are maintained. And we've seen this, by the way, this is the standard language of the Ketubah, that a man promises to his wife that even though the sons inherit, the daughters are maintained out of his estate until they reach maturity or until they're married off. So this is no surprise. Nechasim muatim. If the possessions are few, habanot yizonu vehabanim yishalu al p'tichim. Habanim yishalu al ha'p'tachim. When the possessions are few, the daughters are maintained, but the sons beg at the doors. The sons turn into beggars. There is no sustenance, there's no maintenance for the sons. And Admon is going to object. Admon Omer, Bishvil she'ani zachar hifsadati, because I'm a male, I lose out. I'm really interesting, echoes of today's debates about whether the male or female privilege does or doesn't exist. He absolutely says it. Bishvil she'ani zachar hifsadati, do I lose out because I'm a male? Rabban Gamliel, Ro'eh ani et divrei Admon. Rabban Gamliel says, Ro'eh ani, I see the words of Admon. Now, what does Rabban Gamliel mean? Well, of course, we all know the Tehillah. Nar ha'iti v'gam sakanti v'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezav. I never saw a tzaddik who was abandoned. Is that I never saw or I never agreed with? So most people would translate this Mishnah, the words of Rabban Gamliel, as I agree with. Amar Rabban Gamliel ro'eh ani et divrei Admon. Rabban Gamliel said, I agree with the words of Admon. Now, actually, the halacha doesn't follow Admon. If we look at the Rambam will just tell us straight off in his commentary. The halacha doesn't follow Admon. And Rabban Gamliel must know that, by the way. And my sense is when Rabban Gamliel says, Ro'eh ani et divrei Admon, my sense is he agrees with the sentiment. He may not agree the halacha, but he agrees the sentiment. Or that's what I suspect. Not sure. Anyway, the halacha is that the daughters are maintained and the sons beg at the doors. Let's go on now to the second of Admon's sayings. But in order to understand his second saying, we need to learn a halacha about oaths, about swearing an oath. And I just want to bring you briefly a Mishnah from Shavuot, from the Mishnah of oaths. Shvuat hadayanim, the oath of the judges. When the claim is 2 silver coins and the admission is worth a pruta. So if somebody makes a claim of somebody else, in other words, he lodges a civil claim, and what's the word for the person on the other side, not the claimant, the defendant admits to a part of the claim, then the defendant has to take an oath, because admitting to a part of the claim is equivalent to admitting, there's something there. There's something there. So how much is a part of the claim? Well, okay, the halacha is if it's 2 silver coins, if the claim's 2 silver coins and the admission is a pruta is nothing. It's a penny. It's a cent. It's a half cent. If the admission is a half a cent, the defendant has to swear an oath. But there's a but. There's always a but in the Mishnah. If the admission isn't of the same kind as the claim, he's exempt. So, for example, if I claim that this guy owes me a field and he admits that he borrowed a plow, he's exempt. If I claim that he owed I lent him a car and he admits that I lent him a bicycle, he's exempt. In other words, the admission to be worthy of swearing an oath, the admission has to be the same kind of substance, it's got to be commensurate with the claim. And of course, in the case of the silver coins and the pruta, it's the same. We're talking money. So now let's look at the ruling of Admon. Let's keep that in mind. The admission has to be the same type as the claim, and let's look at Admon. Someone who claims from his neighbor jars of oil. Is he claiming the jars or is he claiming the oil? Someone who claims jars of oil. Vehodalo, but kim kenim. He admits the jars. He admits, oh yeah, I borrowed some jars. He doesn't say, oh, I borrowed these. He doesn't admit he borrowed any oil at all. He says, I borrowed the jars. Admon Omer, Ho'il, Vehodami Natana, Yeshivas. Admon says he's admitted some of the claims. Some of the claim. He must swear. In other words, admitting the jars is equivalent to a part of the claim of the jars of oil. The jars are part of the claim, the jars of oil. And the sages will disagree. The admission is not of the type of the claim. In other words, this is a claim about oil. It's not about jars. The jars are just a container that the oil is in. The claim is about oil, not about jars. That, if you like, is the language of the sages. And Rabban Gamliel is going to say exactly the same words. Ro'eh ani et divrei Admon. I see the words of Admon. Or perhaps better translated as I agree the words of Admon. And here, the halacha is going to go according to Admon and according to Rabban Gamliel rather than according to the sages.